this is Irvina and that's Jabru, and we're here from Lakeside. So I'd like to start off by saying, imagine a world without trade. It is in this environment that you wake up each morning in a tiny house, because your home is only 800 square feet, with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small living room, and a kitchen. All new houses are this
Sounds like what I've got. Have you been snooping?
All new houses are this small because the demand for construction materials, for example wood, is too high. Breakfast is oatmeal, milk, and water. Orange juice is a luxury you can only afford on special occasions. And you can't drink coffee because your country doesn't grow them. And sometimes you wonder what the point...
Okay, you win.
And sometimes you wonder what the point of learning math and science is, what the point of learning math and science anymore is, if most jobs are industrial labor jobs like working at a textile factory, sewing together children's sneakers.
Or getting a bachelor's degree in economics and then working as a bank teller. Good point.
We're in favor of the argument that trade is a good thing and that the benefits of trade outweigh the cost of the environment. There are many benefits to trade. Some of these are trade allows for cheaper goods and services. Not only will these products be cheap, but they will be of good quality. Another benefit of trade is that it encourages industries to use resources more efficiently. Industries are motivated to produce as much as they possibly can from having put the least amount of resources in. This is one of the main reasons goods and services are cheap. An example of money being saved through trade is in Kenya's flower industry. The money spent growing the flowers and exporting them to Europe is cheaper than if Europe were to grow its own flowers. One of the main arguments against trade is the pollution haven hypothesis. This idea is that polluting industries will relocate to areas with less stringent environmental regulations. However, economist Brian Copeland argues that there is very little empirical evidence to support this. Although trade may have some negative effects on the environment, to a certain extent trade is good for the environment. Strict laws are imposed so as to reduce the amount of pollution. The government also issues permits limiting industries on the amount they can pollute, thus encouraging industries to keep up with the level of output whilst using fewer resources. Trade allows countries to attain more of what they want, including environmental protection. It might lead to worldwide pressures to increase environmental standards through technological innovation. Free trade can help the environment by raising incomes. That in turn, the demand for a cleaner environment and cleaner goods. This is the dominance of the technique effect, which explains the tendency for higher income nations to value cleaner environments.
Thank you. That's pretty good.
So what you're saying is free trade increases general economic welfare across all countries. Basically, they're richer and therefore they can afford to be more environmentally aware.
Build demand for more environmentally friendly
Yeah,
products.
because rich countries are usually more environmentally sensitive than poor countries. Canada, everyone in Canada wants to get on a bicycle. Everyone in China wants to get off their bicycles into a car. Okay.
My name is Andrew. This is Elena, and this is Megan. We're arguing that the cost of the environment greatly outweigh the potential benefits from international trade. So we just want to first state, we had a picture of that to put it up, but we want to first state that breathing the air in Beijing for one day is the equivalent of smoking 21 cigarettes. And this is not the only city like this. The rate at which we trade, consume, and produce cannot be sustainably maintained. In fact, we would need 1.5 Earths to keep up with the demand for resources. Trade, international trade, just the transport cost accounts for 3.5% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And when you talk about goods made exclusively for export, that amounts to 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions. And so these benefits do not outweigh these costs. Economic expansion, economic growth, solely depends on our energy supply. And these energy supplies are quickly deteriorating. The alarming rate at which resources are continually being extracted, they're being extracted without the establishment of sustainable resource regeneration. Take the forestry industry, for example, in Southeastern Asia, particularly in Bangladesh. So forestries are being forested at such high rates that it is affecting soil quality and is leading to soil erosion, which is in turn affecting the ability to produce crops. And it's actually led to some food shortages. And stuff like this is only bound to increase as these climate effects are exacerbated. So I want to also bring to light the idea that higher global temperatures can also bring more frequent and higher, bigger magnitude of natural disasters. This is increasingly scary, considering when you think of the tendency of people to move to these urban city centers in search of labor and employment. Let's also not forget about the environmental degradation of the human ecosystems, in which human populations ourselves are inevitably intertwined. Air pollution causes cancer-related deaths, cardiac difficulties, and eye and nose irritations, all because of vehicular transit and coal-produced energy plants. Increased human populations are also pushing animals to the brink of extinction. Take the polar bears in the north, for example, whose population is declining steadily since the depletion of the Arctic ice. Human populations increasing means that we have to decrease and relocate these natural habitats. And for example, it can also lead to the overexploitation of these animals, such as fish, which are crucial for the food supply. So any of these extinctions, in turn, affects our economy and our ability to produce. Trade is a culprit of this degradation. To stimulate the economy, often people in developing countries will engage in this race to the bottom. In this case, the race to the bottom is to loosen your environmental standards and hoping to attract foreign investment. This actually can create extreme negative externalities on the resources and on the industries that depend on these natural resources, like fishing, agriculture, all that stuff. Without sustainable resource regeneration, these goods will become more scarce. The price of these goods may increase, and there will be less sold, less established surplus in the whole. In places that require these natural resources, the average, in places that are heavily reliant on these natural industries, the average income can actually start to be brought down, because eventually their inputs will be too expensive and they'll have to substitute some relatively more expensive goods. This creates a dangerous possibility of a downward ecological spiral, where there are lower national incomes, and that is now with more lenient environmental standards, which in turn is now with lower incomes, and sort of a vicious circle that continues negatively. So, in that being said, this international trade creates these winners and these losers. So the winners might be people like you and I. We're standing in Vancouver, air quality index is around 15 to 25 per day, and I can buy a t-shirt for $10 on the side of the street. But the losers are people who, well, primarily planet Earth, who is extremely running out of these natural resources, and as well as the people who are living in these natural pollution havens. Their quality of life is being substantially brought down by the fact that they have extremely low air and water index, affecting their productivity in the outdoor resource industries. They have less fertile soils, they have more likelihood and more magnitude of natural disasters, fewer environmental habitats, and also higher cost of inputs because these resources are becoming more and more scarce. The losers, what is most scary, these losers will not be contained to these countries that's seemingly across the world. They're coming as resource depletion approaches and becomes more of a reality. The resources, the losers will extend to countries far beyond places just like Southeast Asia, and the environments will affect us all equally.
I guess, you go ahead.
If trade were limited, we argue that each country would use up more of its own resources than if we were to make most of the goods on their own. Because if trade were limited, countries would not be able to specialize in making the products that they are importing today, and therefore they may have no knowledge of how to produce the goods efficiently. Also, trade allows countries to trade improves countries' abilities to obtain high-quality, environmentally friendly goods from other countries at a lower cost. This will encourage the use of environmentally friendly techniques, which can stimulate innovation and technology transfer. This can directly improve the quality of life for all of the citizens.
Also, are you rebutting their proposals? That's what's supposed to be happening. Okay.
Also, trade is not the sole reason for the environmental problems. A high worldwide population leads to resources necessarily being used, as food and other resources need to be supplied to the ever-growing population. And basically, an alternative in which a country limits trade and has to be more self-sufficient would not work.
You say that economic supplies are quickly deteriorating with trade. Let's say trade was limited and different countries were supposed to make their own, the products that they're importing be, like from trade. let's say trade is limited and now they have to make those products on their own. These countries, the reason they started trading in the first place was because making the products themselves was costing them, their opportunity cost was higher if they were making it on their own than if they were trading it with other countries. So if they were making it on their own, they're not specialized, so won't they be using up more resources, like inefficiently, just to make that product for themselves? And if that's the case, then wouldn't the source of resources deteriorate much faster than if trade was taking place? That makes sense.
Yeah. Good
You also
point. How do you
mentioned-
reply to that?
Yeah, well, if you think that, so you're saying that if a certain economy stops or like limits trade, that you're going to use through their faster space, faster time, I guess, and it's going to reduce the efficiency. But if you think historically, like think about Japan. Japan opened to international trade like the late 1800s. Before that, their country was stable. They were able to rely on themselves, and they were one of the top world economies during that time. So just even the fact that they didn't have trade, they were still able to survive and produce a solid economy and society for their citizens.
Which time period are you looking
Like the late 1800s.
at?
They were limited to trade for a while, and then once technology advanced with international ships,
There was no trade before either?
you know, they were very close off. There was minimal, I think, but they were quite limited.
But they haven't lost from trade. For them, the pollution has not been a problem, right?
No,
Even after trade isn't a problem.
no, like now they're open to trade, and still the economy is doing quite well.
Are you on their side of the side? Okay.
I just wanted to add on, we are not arguing in favor of total elimination of trade. Of course, like we know historically most countries, like they were trading since the ancient times, like since we were living in tribes. Of course we need trade. However, we are arguing for imposing some regulations on trade because only in the last, let's say century, when the trade opened up to the extent that it is now, like recent couple of decades, we started getting all these major environmental problems. So we don't need trade, however, we need to limit it to some extent.
It is only the last one.
For example, how?
We don't need more regulations on, like, let's say the amount of trade. So,
How we limit trade? We believe that the only way to effectively limit trade, because there's a little tricky bubble, whereas if there's no trade barriers, there will be pollution. If there are a lot of trade barriers, we'll
Okay, so the first question is, we want to limit trade.
Correct.
Why?
We want to limit trade because it leads to the depletion of these natural resources. And also if it could...
No, but their argument is, what's the opposite of more trade? It's less trade or no trade. So then you're not taking advantage of specializing.
See, that's the thing.
So that would be, for example, I was quite surprised when I went to Vietnam and you go up into the mountains and miles upon miles of lettuce. What the hell is all that lettuce doing up in the mountains in Vietnam? So I asked them in my broken Vietnamese, which is basically nothing. And they said, we're basically the vegetable basket for the world now. And Vietnam they're the highest exporter of rice and the second highest exporter of lettuce. And so most of the lettuce that we buy at Safeway is from Vietnam. Okay, so here's the problem. They're very efficient at producing lettuce. So they take 1 acre of land and they can get 100 heads of lettuce. We're very inefficient at producing lettuce. So we need 10 acres of land to produce the same amount of lettuce. And therefore we're degrading the environment because we're using 9 extra acres of land. Because we're not specializing and we're not trading. So their argument is, and it's a good way to do it. They're saying, well, if you don't trade, what's the effect? Well, the effect is you're going to be using more land because you're less efficient. So Canada needs 10 acres of land to produce the lettuce, whereas if they did it in Vietnam, it would only take 1 acre. How do you counter that?
I like to come to the argument with a different example, a different industry, for example, in the same area. I know that in the Southeast Asia countries, for example, like Philippines, Cambodia, I have this country about 6. Philippines, Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Burma. They account for 60% of fish export in the whole world. And they also have the highest
Of the what?
fish, like fishery in exports. And so with higher
Farmed shrimp.
well, but there's shrimp surveys, which is another thing as well.
Yeah.
Fish exports. And
Looks like fish, smells, looks like shrimp, smells like shrimp, but it sure as hell doesn't taste like shrimp. Okay.
And so places like this, through the transportation spills, or their increased risk of cargo spills, and through the environmental degradation, is over harmful fishing techniques, global warming, and degradation to the ocean, just kind of ocean or environments, that actually can lead to a decline in this fishing industry. And we know that this industry is, we've seen increasingly in the globalized world, industries are so interconnected. And if there's a decline in this huge fishing industry, there'll be a decline in marine energy development, there'll be a decline in shipyard surrounding